Okay, so welcome back. The first topic was easy. This one. I wanted, but it's Parsha Zachor this week, if I remember correctly. I was going to give my puns. Yeah. And it's difficult. Why? Because it's interpreted many different ways. Now, who's heard an approach that any enemy of Israel is Amalek? If you're an enemy of Israel, that makes you Amalek? You've heard that from... What? You've written about it. Okay, I'm in trouble. Okay, thank you. We'll get that in a minute. But it's a very common understanding. Now, I want to read a pasuk you'll know by heart. Okay? Right? Some people say twice. V'haya v'aniach Hashem Elokecha mikol evecha misaviv ba'eretz asher Hashem echet lecha l'rishta timche et zech Amalek. I forgot how's it end. I forgot how it ends. Lo tishkach. That's it. Okay. Now, 0 for 2. Now, what's it say? When did we wipe out Amalek? After we have rest from all our enemies around us. Which means it doesn't make sense, right? I don't want an answer. I want you to be surprised by something I'm sure you didn't notice before, right? That Chumash says that when is the mitzvah to wipe out Amalek? Is when we have no more enemies around us. And then it's time to get rid of Amalek. Then whose enemy is he? For God's sake. But I want to show you today that Amalek is the enemy of God. I want to show you from Chumash. It could be I'm wrong, but the way I understand Chumash, the way Chumash says at least, Mechamet Hashem Amalek, I think it says, he's the enemy of God. So I want to understand what makes him an enemy of God more than... Now, there's nothing wrong. If we have enemies, we have to fight. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying take the other cheek. That's a New Testament. But the idea that any enemy of Israel, that said a lot. But I'm trying to show you. I want to understand Amalek is the enemy of God. To try to understand why. And as God's people representing God, we have a mitzvah to get rid of Amalek because he's God's enemy. So now we have to see what makes him God's enemy to understand what we have to get rid of. Definitely what we have to remember. Yeah.
Why don't we read from the Shalach where it says... We
read B'Shalach in the morning.
A different morning,
yeah.
But first, the main thing is really...
Okay, you're asking a question on Chumash. You're asking a question on Minhag. No, you can ask a question, why the rabbis decide to read this then and this then, etc.
I'm also asking about why Emche in B'Shalach and Timcha in...
So you're not... There's one question, why did we read this in the morning, this on the afternoon, and why this then, and why this on Shabbat Zohar? There's another question, why is the story, when you study Chumash, what's the connection between the story in Shemot to the story to the commandment in Devarim? Now remember something, I told you what, the laws in Devarim are primarily laws for a nation. Going to war, law for a nation. Judicial system, Supreme Court, laws for a nation. National Center, remember? Laws for a nation. The Shemitah Ksafim. And how a king needs to behave. And for Amalek to be a law for a nation makes perfect sense. Because only when you have a king, the Rambam Paschim said la'alacha, doesn't it? It's mitzvah on the king, it's not on every individual. Which means mitzvah on the king means a mitzvah on when you have an army and you're sovereign, you have a king. Right? When you don't have your own country, you can't fight Amalek. I'll try to explain why. Okay, that's my introduction. Now we're going to get to work. Wait, just small sources. We'll get that. Yep.
The king might be optional, though.
What?
The king might be optional, anyway. So.
Yeah, whoever the the Rambam seems. But Rambam is like, we'll see the Rambam in a minute. He says when it comes to Israel, the first thing we do is appoint a king. That's disappointing to those who to the Barbanel. And it depends pretty much when you're living, how you view the king. If you're like the Barbanel and had kings that he had to put up with, don't be surprised he thinks king's a bad idea. Now, and it's a sultanic king. That's a good question. What affected the Rambam? Now back to but a king doesn't mean a king. A king means a sovereign. It's not telling you what the best. Chumash isn't telling you what's the best political system to establish. It's saying, should you pick this system, here's how your political leader has to act. You might pick a democracy or so-called democracy, but who's ever running that system, it's the same principles of the political leader of the nation. His goal is to help the nation. He's the CEO to help the nation achieve its its biblical goals to be a nation sanctifying God, and therefore don't overdo. The lo yabelo. What's too much? You follow? No, that's a different question. But those are guidelines, and therefore the rabbis apply the principles. But you don't paskin that you can't paskin chumash that you have to have a king. You can paskin chumash once you have a leader how they should behave, and that might affect who you vote for. Now back to. Oh, but wiping out Amalek. So let me give out this source sheet now. But no, before we get it, I want to read inside because you see this, no one pays attention to me. Open up Perek Yud Zayin and Shemot. We'll start where you said. Let's read the first story about Amalek. You know the first time Amalek's mentioned, by the way, for the fun of it?
Yeah.
Where? Where in Breshit? He's Esav's grandson. Yeah. V'timnai Tapilegesh, and then etc. Very good. Now, it doesn't mention Amalek, it mentions stay Amaleki. Now, there's a big war going on in the Middle East. Can you imagine the 4 kings from Iraq and Syria, from Mesopotamia, come and attack Canaan? And they didn't have missiles then, so they came by foot. Imagine such a thing. And then there's a war going on, and that war is so typical for future Jewish history. Yeah. Now back to but what happens there? In the battle takes place in a place called Sadeh Meleki. There's a battle area that takes place between Ein Mishpat, whatever. It's in Perek 14, Perek Yudalid, and Breshit. But before Amalek is ever born, right? Chumash calls a battlefield Sadeh Amaleki. Got that? What's going on? He wasn't born yet. Now, well, according to Chazal, Sefer Breshit was written at Har Sinai. Chazal say by Kachet Sefer Abrit, the Sefer Breshit. According to Chazal, Am Yisrael received Sefer Breshit during the 3 days of preparation to become God's people. Because when I read Breshit, I'm following what I understand Chazal. When I'm reading Breshit, I'm reading a book given first and foremost to a nation that spent hundreds of years in slavery, that just witnessed an amazing redemption, right? And on the way to become a nation serving God in the land of Israel, tent or breed. I need to know where I'm coming from, who this God is. What's our connection to other nations? How come we're 12 tribes? What's the goal? Why are we coming to Har Sinai? Why are we conquering Israel? What gives us right to get them out? When I read Breshit, whoa, you follow? From that point of view, that's why I have comments like Baktani. That's why I have comments looking backwards. So, Beit El Ulam Lushem Ber L'Rishona, or Beit Lechem, or Bederech Efrati Beit Lechem. There's all these comments which are taking into consideration that these events happened back then, but here's what I'm familiar with now. Now, what I want to claim is I'll try to explain what a Sadeh Amaleki is. It's a name for a battlefield down in the Negev. Now, it could be because that's where later Amalek is hanging out, but I want to suggest another answer, which doesn't contradict that might add to it. Explain why. Let's go to the first story of Amalek in Perek Yud Zayin in Sefer Shemot. You know what? Let me give you the course sheet already. I'll pass the source sheet out. Open up your Chumash in the meantime. Perek Yud Zayin and Shemot. Now remember, there's all these events. Here, pass these around. Yeah, pass them around. That's a good idea. Take this over here. I try to fit everything onto one source sheet this time, and I ended up very small printing. So pass these around. Whoa. Yeah. They're much better. Still better than your Chumash. Okay, pass those back around that way. Get you one more over here. Okay. But open up your Chumash in Perek Yud Zayin. And I think there's a famine or something. There's no, they ran out of, we just had a Nisayon with the man, didn't we, in Perek Yud Zayin? We had a Nisayon, Sham Lo Chok V'Sham Nisao. Remember, we have all these tests on the way to Har Sinai? It's like boot camp. Now, I want to show you Am Yisrael's attitude problem. Look how in Perek Yud Zayin in the beginning, when there's no food, you have the right to complain, but listen how they complain. Anyone else need that? Raise your hand if you need the page. The page here you go. Okay. Forget that. You have too much stuck up. Okay, there we go. Now, very good. But look. They complain. There's no food. I can say, yeah, we need food. I can say, why'd you bring us out here to die? That's what they don't they say? They say, why if you want us dead? No, they're sure they want him dead. You could have killed us on Egypt on a full stomach. Why'd you bring us out here to the desert to die? Remember? That's attitude problem, isn't it?
Full stomach?
What?
A full
On a full stomach, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying.
I got some swampland for sale in Arizona too.
Okay. Then we get to Perek Yud Zayin, and what do they say? They say the same thing before Kriyat Yam Suf also. They have an attitude that they think they're on a death march. That's what they think. Remember, when God tells them to go conquer Israel, and the Markham come back and say it's going to be impossible, they say, "What are you up to? Right? Why are you bringing us? Why are you commanding us to go conquer walled cities just to kill us?" He says, "B'sinat Hashem otanu." God hates us so much, He wants us to die in battle. That's the people. You see their attitude problem? I'm trying to explain why God is so upset with their behavior. Because you see in the stories, they have a behavior problem. They have an attitude problem. Now, you can try to fix an attitude problem with activities. It doesn't always work.
They have a faith problem.
Depends what you mean by faith. They believe in God. They believe in God. They hate Him. They say so, right? B'sinat Hashem otanu, they say, don't we? Believing in God is not faith. No, faith means emunah means to support. You can be supportive of God and believe in your job and your mission. That's support. I believe that amen doesn't mean to believe. It means to support. Amen. Or like vahi omenet hadasa. Yeah. Naman means God that we support Him and He supports us. Emunah doesn't mean to believe in Him theologically. It means you're supportive of Him. Amen means to support. We're going to read that in a minute. Emunah is being supported. If the chazan makes a blessing and sanctifies God, and people say, "I agree," or "I support that statement," you say, "Amen." Now back to Chumash. Okay, so now look how Perek Yud Zayin begins. How does Perek Yud Zayin begin? Okay, with source B. I'll go back to the Rambam in a minute. Okay, source B on the source sheet. It's also in your Chumash Perek Yud Zayin. Here I have English Hebrew if you want. Okay. The people complain, "Why'd you bring us out here to die from thirst?" The whole thing. But Pasuk Daled. Moshe cries out to God. What do we can do? Now listen to God's solution. Who remembers what God's solution is in Refidim? Take a staff and hit what? And talk to the rock or hit the rock? This time he's supposed to hit the rock, correct? The first time in Refidim. But let's pay attention to where the rock is. Okay, Pasuk Hey. Vayomer Hashem Moshe, Abor lifnei ha'am, v'kach itcha miziknei Yisrael, umatcha asher kita b'tayor kach b'yadcha v'alachta. Take some elders with you, walk in front of the people, and take a teal, we'll see in a minute. Hineni omeid lefanecha sham al atzur b'chorev, v'kita b'tzur v'yitzum min hamayim, v'shatam v'yaskei Moshe. In other words, where's the rock that Moshe is hitting? Where's Tzur Yisrael v'go'alo? On Har Sinai. Where are the people? In Refidim. How far is it from Refidim to Har Sinai? It's a day's journey. The first line in Perek Yud Tet, remember? Or Pasuk Bet. Vayisum Refidim, vaychanu b'midbar Sinai, vayichan sham yisar neged ahar. So, what's God doing? Instead of giving them water in Refidim where they're thirsty, people are dying of thirst, crazy, tremendous thirst, and we hit water where? A day's walk away. Now, and who goes with Moshe? Some elders. Now, pretend you were there. And rumors start coming back. We found water about a 6-7 hour walk from here. Okay, what are people going to do?
Run.
What? Well, I mean, the good guys are going to go run there, get water, and bring it back to the people who don't have enough strength to walk.
Right.
Okay? No, there's going to be elderly people, sick people, and things like that who can't run there right away. There'll be strong people who are going to go there and bring it back for others. There'll be people who just go there and drink and get a cigarette and take it easy, okay? And say, and they're happy that, see, I work out every morning and I deserve to get the water. Now, you have, what I'm getting at is that as soon as the news gets out that there's water in Har Sinai, there's going to be pandemonium. It'll be chaotic, won't it be? Now, you have the leadership group on Har Sinai and Har Chorev, a day's walk away. And what's going to happen next? And the people have to slowly move as a camp. Remember? The people are going to go to the mountain. Because Har Sinai used to be very dry. I think it's called Chorev. And then we get water. Remember when Moshe with Chet Egel, he puts into Maim HaYored Min Nahar? We camp at Har Sinai because of the water source. Remember in Maim the Torah? We go to Har Sinai to get water. It's a beautiful analogy that it's in Mitzvah the same thing. Now,
I don't know, what do you make of the sentence that says, "Vayisku kol adat me'Yisrael mimidbar sin al pi Hashem vayachanu b'refidim"? Why do you think it's Sinai if they're...
no, they're in Refidim. No, God sent them to Refidim, the whole nation of Refidim. They're not at Sinai. And then they run out of water in Refidim, and God tells Moshe to go to Har Sinai a day's walk, right? And get the water there. And we just read it. Kinei omed lefanecha atzur b'chorev. Pasuk Vav. Chorev is the name of Har Sinai.
Then the people didn't see the nace of hitting the rock.
But their elders did. Their leaders did. Okay, but they don't have to see that. They've seen enough to see him. Maybe they need emunah. Okay, whatever it is. That's a different topic for now. But the main thing that's going to happen is that Am Yisrael now is in pandemonium. You follow? And where the stronger people are on their way to Har Sinai to get the water to bring it back, and the weaker people are walking slowly. And now the next line: Vayavo Amalek, Vayilechem Yisrael. Where? B'Refidim. That's where we start landing, don't we? Okay. You can't read it out of its context. Right? Why didn't Amalek attack a day earlier, or 2 days earlier, or 3 days earlier? Because we were organized. Right? Amalek attacks unprotected people. Like that. And that's all through Tanakh. It's piracy. Right? It's like the Wild West.
Change the letters around Refidim, you get Nifredu.
We're separate. Very good. Now, what I'm getting at is that the first story where we meet Amalek, we meet a nomadic people that they're always, the Midianim are also nomadic, but they make a living by selling goods, or their daughters, no, that was a bad joke. The Midianim are gypsies basically, but they make an honest living. They try to, but they're nomadic. They don't have a land. I mean, they hang out in Midian, but they're like Amalek is nomadic. There's no. If I showed you a map of the Middle East, right, you can't.
Near where they are.
What?
Amalek is.
Amalek's all over the Middle East. We find them everywhere. We're coming out of Egypt. We find them in the Negev. We find them in every Yarden. We find them in Emek Yisrael. We find them in Siklag. Right? They're nomadic. Right now, how do they make a living? They don't have land. They make a living by doing what? By attacking unprotected people.
Terrorists.
Yeah. Terrorists. I want to get into terrorists. That's a different thing. Terrorists can have a land and have their own thing, and they can do things in the name of God. If they think I'm done, don't get me wrong. They're wrong. Right? But terror is something totally different. Right? I'm talking about piracy. Right? I'm talking about people who have no fear of God in them. Yirat Elokim. What Chumash will say in a minute. Because Yirat Elokim is I call Pinter Lagoy. Yirat Elokim means basic moral behavior that God expects from everyone, but unfortunately isn't so often. Isn't so thing. It's like it's people living outside of New York. There's people who just are naturally honest. You follow? And kind and nice. And then there's New Yorkers. No. Listen, why I said that? No. I said New Yorkers on purpose. Why? Because you could be a New Yorker living in Chicago, okay, or moving to Miami. What I mean, but when people say he's a New Yorker, what's that mean? It doesn't mean he lives in New York. It's describing a type of behavior. Am I right?
No.
Right? No. I'm don't get me wrong. I'm not saying
It's a generalization.
it's a generalization, right? I'm not saying right or wrong. Listen, I'm just giving. I'm not saying. No. It's important for the share. I'm not.
You have a brother in New York.
But he's not a New Yorker. If you go to Camp Stone, you're no longer a New Yorker, even if you live in Manhattan. You follow? That's what we tell kids in camp. It depends on the education you get. I said people with a certain attitude. Oh, I know everything, and no one else knows anything. And this idea that okay, New York. Okay, right. I'm just giving an example. Let me explain. I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying that a lot of times you what do you call it? You take a certain geographic area or certain people living in an area, and you attach them a certain quality. Now, look in Webster Dictionary, these old dictionaries, the word Jew. Okay? In a dictionary, sometimes it's a verb, which means when ripping someone off in business. That's a disaster. But it's but hopefully it should become an old meaning. But there's something behind it. But what I'm saying again, that doesn't mean every Jew is that way, but a certain name becomes associated. Listen, let's say I'm producing belts, okay? My wife has a factory, she makes belts, and she sells them to a retailer. I mean, not me, but what's her name? She's an Eshet Chayil. I sang about her Friday night. What am I talking about? Chagor Natna Leknani. Remember? She's multitasking. The Eshet Chayil. She's not a woman of valor. She's multitasking. Chayil means a lot. Remember, she's running a business. She's whoa. You follow? She's multitasking, isn't she? She's running businesses. She takes care of her work. Whoa, she's got a whole operation going on. And one of the things is she gives, a Kanani means what? Not a Canaanite. It means a merchant, right? Eretz Canaan is called mercantile land. Why? Because the Amaris, the trade route that goes right along. So even though Canaanites were living here, because this becomes a mercantile land, the name for a merchant becomes a Kanani. That's Rashi on Yud. It goes to a Ish Kanani, not a Canaanite, but a merchant. Okay? Now, another example, Yishmaelim is saying a caravaner. Right? Orchat Yishmaelim. Okay? And then Midyanim Socharim. You follow? I've read the story about them. Oh, Yosef and his brothers, remember? There's Midyanim Socharim, because typical Midianites are merchants, they're peddlers, with the pushcart and everything. And the Yishmaelim are caravanners, taking goods from Mesopotamia down to Egypt. That doesn't mean everyone was a descendant of Ishmael. That becomes a general name in the time of Matan Torah for those. If you want to say he's a caravaner, he's a Yishmaelite. If he's a merchant, he's a Canaanite. Got it? Now, therefore, what I'm trying to explain is, there was a tribe when we came out of Egypt, of Amalekites, who might have been descendants of the original Amalek, but their behavior, right, becomes Amalekite behavior. Now, what's that behavior? It happens forever. It happens all through society. There's people who take advantage of unprotected people, especially travelers. I can't put. If you learn the Wild Wild West in America, people robbing stagecoaches, robbing bank things. There's one thing when nations go to war and fight, whatever it is, or get into a fight. You took my parking spot or something like that. But when you have a nation and you have people, and their entire livelihood is rooted and based in what? In taking advantage of unprotected people, right? Well, then that's an enemy of God.
They're lacking in morality.
Yeah, it's worse than immorality.
Amoral.
Amoral. Okay. And that's no yirat Elokim. That's what it'd be called in a minute. Now, if there's an outsider coming from a different land visiting, some tourist coming, and she has a pretty wife. Let's kill the husband and take the wife. Okay? That's a society with no yirat Elokim. Now, if he was a citizen or living in the area, you wouldn't do it to him because he has neighbors. But an outsider, no, he's unprotected. He's just a foreigner. He's a migrant. So what did Abram tell Sarah? Here's our cover story, right? Yeah, and when Abimelech asked Avram, "Why'd you lie to me?" Okay, in Yirat Elokim. I'll give you the best example of Yirat Elokim. Yosef accuses his brothers of, "You guys are spies." Remember? Right? Now, pretending to be Tzapna Paneach, right? He doesn't want to spill the beans that he's Jewish or that he's his brother, yeah? And therefore he says, "You all go to jail." Remember? Don't pass go. One brother. Bring Binyamin back. Until then, you're all sitting in jail. 3 days later, he comes in and says, "What? Change of plans." Yeah. And how's he introduced change of plans? Et Elokim ani yoreh. Remember? It's the end of an Aliyah. So every Balkori remembers. What's it mean? He's telling his brothers, pretending to be an Egyptian. He's saying, "I'm a Pintali Goy. I'm a moral person, not amoral, but moral. Moral." Got it? Now. And we'll see in a minute that Amalek below Yoreh Elokim. We'll read that. That's in Parshat Zachor, if I remember. Now, so Vayvam Vayachim Yisrael b'Refidim, and God tells Moshe tells Yeshua, get some men. Men means men of war. Why? Why tomorrow? Why not today? Because it's a day's walk to get there. And Machar, it's Moshe on Rosh Hagivah and Matei Elohim biyadi. And then when they look at the Matei Elohim, what's that mean when they look at the Matei Elohim? When they understand what they're fighting for and their goals, that's why you need symbols when you're fighting. Every army has them, and every nation that wants to brainwash their soldiers to go to war. Like in World War I, you know what the British did to convince people to go to war? Study World War I. Well, there's such values of what do you call it? Of why we're going to fight. But you had your symbol. You had your Union Jack, I think it was called. Mm-hmm. You fought for the flag. You fought for the Queen. That's the way people are. Good or bad, you can argue. But that's human nature. And therefore, it's important for God because God wants us to go to war with Amalek. That's part of our training. But He wants us to see that God can help us in war. But when you're fighting a war, you have to remember why you're fighting. And there's a goal behind the war. That's the mission in Rosh Hashanah, isn't it? When you understand why you're chosen, then God helps you in battle. Chumash screams it over and over again. Just read all through Devarim. If you keep the laws of Devarim, God will help you defeat your enemies. Remember, in Shemot Tishmot Kol HaMitzvah Azot, then Balrashtem, etc. If you don't, you won't. We say it in Shema even, from a Parnasa point of view. It's the most obvious theme of Chumash. Yeah, real quick.
People had seen Moshe take his makel with the Yamsuf.
Yeah.
Now the Zakanim, I assume, told the people what Moshe had done in Horeb.
Yeah.
So the people already knew this makel was very
was
important.
very powerful.
Now, again, did they understand that it was from Hashem?
Yeah, but that depends how you educate them. Because I can see, wow, this is... everyone can see the miracle. The question is it something magical or something logical? That's all. But people tend to see... People would rather see the magical part of it. I saw a movie called The Raiders of the Lost Ark. Mm-hmm. And this guy was digging, right? Because when he got the Ark, what was the hope? If we get this Ark, what will happen? We'll have all the power. And we can win wars. That's not exactly Chet Ego, but that's what I was getting at with the Chet Ego, sure. They wanted the Ark. The Ark to them was a symbol of military power. And they were celebrating, and their whole connection to God was consumer. God working with us, Hashem Yishma Chama, and not Hashem Shmo. No, it's not the idea that God working for you as opposed to you working for God, and the way you sanctify God by how you behave as a nation. Again, there's a need to fight wars, but you have to remember why you're fighting, what's the goal of your fighting. Now let's go back to Amalek. So that's the first time we have Amalek, and why are they attacking? They're attacking because we're unprotected. Now, and some people, it could be happen more than once. But now, if you remember other stories, remember Tziklag with David Amalek? David Amalek is going to war actually with the Plishtim against Shaul. But he's faking it, remember? With Achish Melagat, remember the Bible in the end of Sefer Shmuel? Okay? He's with his men where? He's fighting now up on the way towards in Emek Yisrael. He's about to fight and by the Gilboa. Okay? So at last minute they send him home because they don't trust him. They caught on the other Sunday Plishtim. While David and his men, and his army men, are out fighting, the women and children are staying in Tziklag. It's down in Teifaza somewhere. Understand? Okay. Who attacks? Amalek attacks and takes the women and children. Why did they attack when David was there? Because that's what they don't attack then. There's another Amalek kid who, after the battle of Shaul, what's he going? He starts collecting rings and wallets and jewelry and cash you follow from the dead bodies. And he found a really cool crown, right? And then he thought there was a pawn shop down in Tziklag. I mean, actually, when he runs away to Tziklag, he's running. He knows his friends are going to be in Tziklag. He had no idea David would be back there. Right? That's how David knows he wasn't coming home. He wasn't coming to bring the crown to David. He was coming to bring home to his. They got Shalal there. He got Shalal there. And then, oh my gosh, David's there. Then he makes up a story. Oh, I brought it to you. That's why David he knows he's lying, because anyway. That's but I'm getting with every time you find Amalek. Now, when David chases after Tziklag, I have the story here. If we have time, we'll read it. He's chasing Amalek. Remember, he gets his women and children back. Who shows him where they're hiding? Right? And Mitzri, who was abandoned by his master, the Amalekite master. That happened. The Amalekites had stolen an Egyptian traveler, right? Made him the servant, right? He got sick. They abandoned him to die. That's the story, right? Because I don't care about humans. He's dying. Who cares about him? They left him there to die. David brings him back to life. They give him food, etc. And then David asks him, "Show me where they are." On one condition, he says, "I'll show you. Don't bring me back to my master. No, set me free afterwards." Which means he hated it. He didn't want that job. Mm-hmm. Because there's a law in the Middle East, returning runaway slaves was an ancient international law that you had remember Uncle Tom's Cabin. But that was a whole theme from before. Now back to you see where we're going. I'm trying to explain. Every time you find Amalek in Tanakh, it's not a people. It's not something genetic. It's a type of behavior. That's why I made such a big deal about my New Yorker joke. You understand? Again, I'm not coming to explain about New Yorkers. I'm just using an example of everyone else, what people say, how people use generalizations, but all of a sudden becomes a type of behavior.
Say Tel Aviv next time.
Okay. Okay.
You're going to explain what type of being true.
Okay. Now back to how about Kaplanisim? Parts like a place being related to a behavior. Now back to okay. Now in light of that, let's look at our Parshat Zachor, and we'll see its neighbors. So now we did in Sefer Devarim. So remember Parshat Zachor. Look, I'd rather you see in your Chumash, but I'll show you inside in a minute. Zachor asher sach Amalek b'derech b'tzeitchem Mitzrayim. That matches so far, right? Asher kol chaba derech makes sense. He happened upon you when you were traveling. Vayzadei b'cha, he attacked who? The tail of your camp. Kol nechashalim acharecha, all you weak people. V'ata'yef v'yageh means thirsty, doesn't it? Yisab comes to ayef means thirsty in Tanakh. V'yageh, worn out. And kama, below Yorei Elokim is Amalek. I know it's a machloka parshanim, but I think Pshat is Amalek's not Yorei Elokim. Now what? Why do we have to remember that? I want to talk about Jewish memory because it's a big theme in Sefer Devarim. Okay, we're going to see what I call next door neighbors. I'll give you examples of Zachor and open up. Now you need your Chumash. Open up Sefer Devarim, Perach Avdalad, Pasuk Chet. Devarim, Pasuk Chet. Remember, be careful of Negat Sarat. Perach Avdalad. Shalom b'Negat Sarat. Here, next door neighbors is going to be super important. No, that's the wrong one. What's the Chumash? Going around? No, I have a whole bunch flying around. Oh, here, it's right here. I got him. Very good. Okay. Yishamer b'Negat Sarat. Remember, follow the laws of Negat Sarat. Listen to what your rabbi tells you. Right? Pasuk Tet. What's Pasuk Tet say? Zachor. Remember what got it to Miriam. B'derech b'tzeitchem Mitzrayim, right? Does it say b'derech b'tzeitchem Mitzrayim? Yeah. How do you like that? It's called a Gzera Shava. That can't be by chance. Zachor b'derech b'tzeitchem Mitzrayim. Now, are we supposed to remember how bad Miriam was? She talked lashon about her brother and think bad about Miriam? No, that's for shalom, right? Ramban even claims this is a mitzvah aseh to do what? No, it's a mitzvah aseh. It's not a mitzvah lo taseh not to speak lashon hara. It's a mitzvah aseh every day to remember not to speak lashon hara. It's a Ramban on the spot. You do it for homework. That's a being Torah. What? Now, is that pshat? No. But for something to be mitzvah aseh, remember he counts up all the assays. I need a pasuk. He brings two proofs. First he brings the proof it has to be mitzvah aseh, and then he brings the proof why it has to be not speaking lashon hara, to remember not speak lashon hara. Every other zachor is a mitzvah aseh. Zachor yom Shabbat lekadasho. We count that. Zachor Amalek. We count that. Remember you were a slave in Egypt. Right? He says every other zachor is a super important mitzvah aseh. The guides our behavior, correct? So this can't be any different. So that's his proof. It's a mitzvah aseh. Now, what is the mitzvah aseh? The mitzvah aseh is to remember, not how bad, to remember that even though she was at tzedekah and she meant well, and it wasn't during Chazar Sashat, but he gives all the reason, even despite all that, she was still punished. Kal v'chomer us, remember, who we mean mad and we do it in public and during Chazar Sashat, you follow? And during davening, al kal v'chomer, we need to remember not how bad she was, but even though she was so good, even Miriam got punished. Do you follow? Now, then he brings the proof why it has to be that this has to be the mitzvah to say why. He brings an amazing proof. You have to look at it inside. He says, "How could it not be a mitzvah to say?" That's his proof. And he says it. You have to read it inside. It's like the thing. How do we know Yaakov wore a hat? Vayitzi Yaakov mi Beersheba. Without a hat. That Ramban says that right here. Look it up, okay? For homework. That's on the source sheet. You have to look it up, because if you look it up, you'll remember it better. I hope I'm not lying, because mitzvah sheker terchak. What I'm getting at He's saying Zachor has to be something, memory, that's transformative. Meaning memory that shapes your behavior. Which is, that's Jewish memory. Remember, even Zachor Yom HaShabbat, it's memory that shapes how you behave. It's not nostalgic memory. I remember we had a great time somewhere. It's not nostalgic. It's not nostalgic memory. It's transformative memory that shapes our behavior. It's called core memory. Or if you were younger, you would have seen the movie Inside Out. You never saw that movie Inside Out, probably. If you saw the movie, you know what I'm talking about. A young girl has a traumatic experience when her parents move from her hometown to some new place. And they left Teaneck and went to, out west somewhere. He was relocated, and then her whole life is from that trauma. So that's something in her memory all the time that affects her behavior when she grows up, etc. But that's human. Ask a psychologist. Now back to our topic. What's the next neighbor? Let's check a look now. We're in Perek Havdalet, I said. Okay, I want to see the context. Remember, and these are laws for a nation. These are laws that came with the Ten Commandments that Moshe first got on Har Sinai in the first 40 days. Where are we? Perek Havdalet. Perek Havdalet. What's the next case? When you lend money, and you take a collateral and it's something they need, like a blanket or a pillow or something like that, return it because they need it, and we don't want them to cry out to God and, hey, that rich guy's taking advantage of me. So, okay. Then pasuk Yudalid. I don't think we pasuk this way. Lo tashok sechir ani ve'avion me'achecha b'yamot titein tzcharo. If you have a day worker, you have to pay him on the same day. You can't say, I'll pay you later, I'll pay you. Like your babysitter, I'll pay, you pay her, it's called a schir yom. It's called halanat sachar. But that's, do we paskin this way? I forget. It's only deal right though. No. Again, why ki anihu hu neseb nafsho? But the context here is about behavior, about ideal behavior and just behavior. Now look at pasuk Ketzayin. Lo yimtu avot abanim ubanim lo yimtu avot ish becheto yamot. Right? What's that mean? We don't punish people for what the parents did, or children for what the parents did. Alright, how about the Ten Commandments? What's God say? Guess what? God can. You can't. God can do that, and that's a scare tactic. If I'm driving in the car with my kids, and there's a yellow light, right? If I'm by myself in the car, yellow light, you speed up. If your kid's in your car, yellow light, you slow down. Your wife's in the car, no question. Unless she's about to have a baby. Okay. Now what I'm getting at, my stupid jokes. What I'm getting at is that the idea that each person's responsible for their deeds. We don't punish people for what their parents did or for their children what they did. God can, but we can't. Don't take advantage of migrants and orphans and widows, etc. Why? Remember what? You were once a migrant, and they took advantage of you. You were homeless, remember? You were migrant people in Egypt. They took advantage of you. They enslaved you. They treated you like dirt. When you become a nation, remember, and that's why God took you out of Egypt, to take that collective memory of suffering and make sure never to do that to others. The Chumash screams it, doesn't it? That's why God took you out of Egypt. And therefore, I'm commanding you this thing. That's the essence of your nation. We learn from our suffering. We redeem our suffering. Right? Pesach is not the history of our redemption. It's the redemption of our history. If you understand the difference. I take my difficult, it's called a nisayon. I take my difficult experience I went through, and I learn it to know what it feels like to suffer, and I know never to do that to somebody else. Okay. The same thing when you're harvesting your field. Remember? You're supposed to forget. Leave over Omer in the field. Don't go back. Leave it for the orphan and the widow. There's a whole Megillah about it. The same thing with your olive harvest. The same thing with your fruit harvest. Pasach habet. V'zacharta. Ki avedi be'eretz Mitzrayim. Al keinu rokim mitzavcha lasot. You follow the pattern of what's going on? We're talking about a society that its core memory is studying its history and our collective suffering, even though we didn't suffer, but remembering how other people suffered, redeeming that and making sure that there's not, if you're God's people, you have to be known as a nation. It's called doing tzedek u'mishpat. That's the job of the king, the job of shoftim mishpat tzedek. It's all, you can't miss It's the biggest theme through Chumash. Now, ask any Navi who comes to explain why Churban happens. Now, the next one is to make sure the judges, judge properly. But don't overdo the punishment. Only 40, not maybe 39, but no more than 40. Now, then we have Yibum. We'll skip that. And when people are fighting, you can't play dirty. Pasuk Yud Aleph. I can't read that out loud. You can figure that out. That's all. Now, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Okay. Loya b'kischa even b'avim gdola uktana. What's that mean? You can't have in your pocket big stone sets. Not because it'll break the washing machine. Right? It means weights. Remember, weights? And you can't have two weights that both say 1 kilo. Mm-hmm. One really was 1.1 and the other was 0.9, and you use it for trading. Got it? That's how else are you going to make a living? It's the same thing with dry measures. Now, it doesn't say not use them. What's it say?
Don't even
have them in your pocket. La halacha, it's the din of avodah zarah, doesn't it? It's worse than chametz on Pesach. It's as bad as chametz on Pesach. I'm sorry. Remember, you have to burn it. You can't have it in your own. Listen, don't say don't use it. You can't own it. You can't be around it. It's by your oil, by your matzeh. Got it? And then look at what it says now. Instead, Eben Shem Avet Tzedek Yelach. Now, who can you? Let's say you use those phony stones. Who can you use them on? If you have 1.1 and 0.9 weights and you switch them when the buyers come, understand? Who can you do that to?
Nobody.
No, you're outside, but who?
You can't have them. How can you use them with something?
No, but let's say you have them. What are you going to use them for? Which customers are you going to use them on?
Jews.
Non-Jews, exactly. Because they won't even notice. So it's not just stealing. It's worse than stealing. Why? Because you're stealing and the person stealing doesn't even know he got stolen. That's worse than stealing. With stealing, at least I know someone stole from me. But you're stealing and the person doesn't think he was stolen from. You're taking advantage of the disadvantage. Yeah, we'll see his next door neighbor in a minute. Okay.
So that becomes lifnei iver.
What?
Before you said the definition of a Jew.
Unfortunately, it became a definite. That should bother us terribly that came into the dictionary. That we have to do tshuva for.
That becomes lifnei iver.
What?
That becomes lifnei
iver. Now look what God says about it. What's it say? Instead of Shem of Tzedekah, why? Ki tovat Hashem kosei ele kosei ado. It doesn't say it's a toiva, it says tovat Hashem. A toiva is something disgusting. Like it says lo tochal kol toiva. You're an am kadosh. God's people don't do things because they're God's people. Don't do things that are disgusting. Because you have to. It's called act like a mensch, and therefore what do you call it? And things toivot like all the arayot, they're toivot, sleeping with an animal and incest and things like that. They are toivot, therefore you don't do them. Now, this is what makes God upset. You understand the difference? Because most people don't see this like you would see a toiva. If you see someone ripping someone off in business, you follow? You might even ask him for a donation, but you don't. You're not going to call him a toiva. You're not going to have what do you call it? You're not going to have you're not going to have demonstrations against him and things like that. You follow? But other toiva you might have. Got my point? Now, but we're talking about behavior that is disgusting in the eyes of God. And then what's the next law? Amalek. See what I mean by next door neighbors? Okay. It's all in the context of a whole section of Devarim which is shaping our national behavior, and it's another memory that shapes our behavior. It's not remembering to kill people just because who the great grandparents were. It can't be. Right? Rather, it's a memory that I remember every day. Some people hold, but because we might do things like that ourselves sometimes. You follow? Yeah. You have to remember how bad that is, and how bad. And maybe you're not going to do it, but don't ask the person who does it for a donation to your shul. Maybe for your school, but no, I'm just joking again. Now, got my point? Now, I want to give another proof why it can't be something genetic. Why? We don't know that they don't have a land, Amalek. Now, if we're supposed to punish any descendant of Amalek, got it? From anyone who attacked us, X thousand years ago, right? Who is keeping track? Number one. Number two, do we go by maternal descent or paternal descent, or both? Are there any halachot of that? Okay? If you understand the law is genetic, it's simply impossible to keep. It's not realistic in any way at all. From all sides, from a technical point of view. Because how do you know who was there? Genetic testing? Where's their DNA? Is it only people who were adults at that time? Or even, how about if the mother was pregnant at that time? Are they considered Amalek for all their descendants? Right? There's no laws for that. And we don't know where they are. So how can it be mitzvah dorot if something is totally impractical? But the mitzvah to remember is key, because it shapes your behavior. And then we get the law for a nation. Why? Because there's a phenomena in world history of international piracy, right? Remember the Pirates of the Caribbean? Maybe you saw that movie. But you've heard of piracy on the high seas? 1700s, there's what do you call it? There's trade. The New World's growing like crazy. Tons of trade, shipping, wool. All that's world economy is growing leaps and bounds. And people take it. Who takes advantage? Pirates. Because any ship in the open sea, you can attack, right? And then a whole group of people start making a living. Hey, what?
More people learn to do
Yeah, it's right. It becomes what do you call it? It becomes a fad. And now, who can stop? If you're an international traveler, you can't have an army with you all the time, right? You can hire a private guard or you can pray, but you can't protect yourself from that Amalek type behavior. But who can fight Amalek? Who defeated piracy on the high seas? If you saw the Pirates of the Caribbean, the British Navy. What enabled Britain to do it? First, they needed to protect their trade, but they had an army, they had a navy. The only individuals can't fight Amalek phenomena, but nations can. You with me? And therefore, the land God gave us, Baruch Hashem, is located on international trade routes. You know the spice route, you know the Negev, you know the Sinai, the Via Maris going through our land. There's so much trade. In fact, it's called Eretz Canaan. Remember, there's so much trade going through here. Even if we have peace from our enemies, we're fine. If there's still phenomena of piracy in our area, right, nearby, that we can help out with, we have a national obligation for the international community to wipe out piracy. You follow? But when can you do that? Only when you've solved your own problems, okay? And you have a nation, you have an army, you have a king. You have a king, which means you have an army. In other words, it's not enough for you to be good and secure. Sometimes there's a need, maybe to be an international policeman in that sense. If God blesses you with sovereignty, and you have a strong country, and you have a strong army, and there's phenomena outside your country, of piracy, which could easily be in the Negev or in the Sinai, then you have a responsibility. Remember, your king has a responsibility to do what? To wipe that out. Now, who gets that first commandment to wipe out Amalek? Shaul when? So you don't have your Navi with you, but no one has the phone. You can look it up. What he does is he it says beforehand, Shaul defeated the Plishtim. Then he says Menachem bisaviv mikol ovav, Aram, Mamon, Moav. Right? It says Shaul at the end of Perek Yudalid. You can look up again for homework. Defeated all his enemies around him, okay, and Amalek. And then we have the detailed story about what? When does God tell Shaul it's time to fight Amalek? After he defeats enemies around. Now, and where's Agag? Agag is not a descendant of Amalek. His behavior is Amaleki. He says, remember what I told you about Amalek. Now we have a king. Amalek is evil. Agag is evil because he's evil, not because his grandparents were. How do I know? I'll quote the prophet Samuel about to kill him. Kasher shikla nashim charbecha, kein tinishkal min Hashem imecha. Which means what? Right? Agag is being killed for war crimes. Because what was he doing? You kill people, right? And you'll get it back now. He says, "Go chatamet alamadi." They're called chataim. Shaul now that he has an army, he can go and fight Amalek because that's his national. Because you're the king of Israel, and Agag is evil, and he's in the Negev, and he's ruining trade. You follow? And now we finally have a nation and a king. Instead of your leaders only protecting yourselves, you can now help the international community.
Don't they say Haman is a descendant of Agag?
That's a midrash again. That's not pshat. Yeah. Agagi is actually. But listen, what's Amalek behavior in the Megillah? What is Haman's first decree? On a certain day of the year, every Jew in the entire Persian Empire, by law, is unprotected. Read it carefully. Isn't that exactly what it says? Right? No, it's on a certain day, because who protects them all year long? The Persian government, right? So there's a Persian decree that on one day, any Jew, unprotected, do whatever you want to him. Lashmid, larog, labeit, whatever you want, and nothing will happen to you. Got that? And that's a decree. Now, who would act on that decree? An Amalek type behavior. Now, how do we get out of it? What's the second decree? We can defend ourselves. Yeah. But someone who was prosecuted by the first decree and thought there was still an opportunity to try to take advantage of it. And that's Amalek. That's where I see Amalek in the Megillah. So remember, that goes to Zohar. But at that type of using, when you have a migrant people or people unprotected, taking advantage of them, right, because you can, and doing things which you wouldn't do to someone who's protected. Basically, the whole idea of Judaism is you see someone unprotected, someone less fortunate, you help them. That's all through Chumash, isn't it? And that's the whole section in Devarim. I could have mentioned in Mishpatim. Remember, we read 2 weeks ago. It's a theme. Just read Yirmiyahu, read Yeshayahu. That's all they scream about. The people coming to Mikdash praying. God says, "Look at your society. You're all corrupt." No, remember, read Isaiah chapter 1, which we read for Shabbat Chazon. Remember, and who cares about your prayers? Your hand, your society is full. Remember, that's Hashiva Shabtin Kushanabi Atzenik Vatchila. It's in davening everywhere you turn. Now back to so I'm trying to explain. I think my time's almost up. Yeah, I'm trying to explain how I understand Amalek and what Parshat Zachor is about. So Parshat Zachor is like all the other Zachors. It's memory. It's Jewish memory that shapes our behavior, and there's such a tendency, for sure, on a national level. Like piracy, for sure, is bad. But even in business, I'm giving its next door neighbor. Okay? The idea of taking advantage of other people, unprotected people, especially to make your own profit, as opposed to knowing what it feels like to be taken advantage of and making sure to go out of your way to help people who are unprotected instead of ripping them off, but helping them. That's a Jewish way of life. And that's a memory that, again, all the memory shape our day-to-day behavior. Remembering the Exodus, you can't miss that, right? Remembering Shabbat, that got created, but why he made man? Remember B'Tselem Elokim. The culture to make it special, because what you think about on Shabbat affects how you act the other 6 days of the week. It's memory that shapes your behavior. All Zachor says that. It's not nostalgia. It's core. I like to call. My joke was if you had a core memory, remembering the Exodus. Remember Kor Barzel? So that was my little cute joke.
The Jonathan Tax says there's no word in Hebrew for our history. Historic is the modern word.
Yeah.
And the answer is Zachor.
Zachor, yeah. But we're living all the time.
Zachira.
Yeah. It's core memory that's running all the time. If it shapes your behavior, it comes with education. Now I'll go back to where I started. Let me just make sure I cover. See, look at the Rambam now in the first source. So he says, Mitzvah, Shosh Mitzvot Nistavu Yisrael. Number 1, to appoint a king means to have a sovereign state. But let me explain what I mean. To be at Har Sinai, let me go back to Har Sinai. What did we take upon ourselves? Atem Tuli Mamlechet Konim B'Goy Kadosh. Mamlechet Konim doesn't mean a kingdom where everyone's a rabbi. It means a priestly kingdom, meaning, I'll give you my summary. When we accepted to be a nation representing God, it was an eternal commitment. Now, individuals can't eternally serve God because Ad Be'av Esrim. But a nation can be eternal. Correct? Mm-hmm. And therefore, our responsibility as a nation, we represent God as a nation, not just as individuals. Now, nations can be eternal if you, have children and teach them. Also from Devarim. So I have to have children and teach them and pass on the tradition. Read Tizimayim Chet again for homework. Now, every individual has his own personal life, has his communal life, and his national. You're part of a nation, you're part of a community, and you're who you are. There are 3 places in Chumash that talk about day-to-day behavior, like law after law after law. You know where they are? There's a big one in Devarim, right? That's like the law. It's Re'eh Kitetse, Re'eh Shoptim Kitetse, half of Kitavo. That's in Moshe's speech, basically. The laws of actually starts at Chanan Nekev. There's Parshat Mishpatim we just had, and there's Kedoshim Tiyu. How they line up? Kedoshim Tiyu is basically an individual representing God. No, it's if you're Kadosh, Ki Kadosh, I'm Hashem, your boss. I separated you to serve me. Here's how you behave as an individual. Just read through them. It's about individual behavior because you as a Jew represent God. Mishpatim is about a society, community, isn't it? You have the judicial system. Remember? About just laws and basic ethical laws. Remember? V'ger lo tilchatz, v'ger lo toneh, and returning lost items, even to someone you hate. Remember all this stuff? V'sheker lo techach, not taking shochad. And then that's the thing. And Devarim are laws for a nation. Again, they include some, but it's primarily laws for a nation. Our national, I told you, the king, our national center. We have, to make sure you go visit that national center, we have a Jewish tax, which Chazal call Maser Sheni. It's Aser Taser. Remember, it's also in Devarim. That's a Jewish tax. Why? You take 10% of your produce and you keep it. Correct? But it's a Groupon. You can only use it where? In restaurants in Jerusalem. Right? What's that going to force you to do? You're going to go to Jerusalem. And what's in Jerusalem? Mikdash and the Kohanim. It says, Aser Taser v'achal tifnei Hashem elkecha leman tilmad lirat Hashem elkecha kol yamim. It's right there, isn't it? Devarim is setting up a nation. You follow? At the center of the nation is a national center with a Supreme Court that does justice, with circuit courts, Shoftim b'chol sharecha, v'shoftim mishpat tzedek, and keep leibim chadavar v'chem to the elam al kol ma shirivcha Hashem, and that's where the Supreme Court's going to be. And the Kohanim and Levim are going to be centered. They'll be over, but their center will be there. And don't forget them when you bring your Maser Sheni. Remember, don't forget the Levi. Asher b'sharecha, and therefore, the need to come to Yerushalayim. It's all about building a society where Torah is at the center, but also people working for a living. And what you do, it's building capital and using the capital properly. So, therefore, if you're a nation representing God, I need to be a nation. To be a nation, I need a land and I need a government. But the goal is not just having a land, having a government. It's how that government turns that nation into a nation representing God. The CEO is the king, and that's tremendous responsibility. It's not just a privilege. It's a privilege to have that responsibility. Therefore, you have to have a king. Once you have a king, get rid of Amalek. He puts that with there. And then you can build a Beit HaMikdash. Which is a wall, you follow? Getting rid of Amalek first means you have to have a Mishkan anyone can come visit. Shlomo only builds a Mikdash, where Dad tells David, you have to wait a little bit. You did great, but we didn't. People still hate you because you just went to war. Wait for another generation. You'll have what? You have a son. He'll be an Ish Menucha. He'll buy for God. Now, the Rambam has an excuse why it doesn't apply anymore. First of all, he says you don't go to war against anybody unless you open peace first. Remember? He says, Lo yitzim Mitzvah say labid zer Amalek, shneimar timchetzech Amalek. Mitzvah say this kol tamid masav ha'ra'im be'erota. That's the whole shir of that. So I'm just to remember how bad they were, which is transformed in memory. Okay, look in. Shneimar stochot ha'shalom Amalek. Ve'nosim mechama im adam ba'olam atshrim lo l'shalom. Even Amalek, you don't go to war unless if he's living in peace with you. It's not. You don't go to war because of someone's genetic background. It just can't be that anyone genetically from Amalek from 4,000 years ago is Chayav Misa, no matter how good or bad they are. It just goes against the entire Torah. But memory, that's Jewish. That's Judaism. Memory shaping your behavior. I'm trying to show you that's the biggest theme of Chumash, and where Parshat Amalek is mentioned, Parshat Zachor, that's why we read publicly. The story is back in Shemot, but the main memory that shapes your behavior, and it's no different. Remember what happened to Miriam, B'derech B'tzeit Chamem Mitzrayim, and this is B'derech B'tzeit Chamem Mitzrayim. Take your history and learn from it. Becoming Egypt, it's all through. If I had more time, I could bring you probably another 2 hours of Nevi'im, giving the same message, and saying if you don't follow that message, God will take away your temple and everything in your land. Okay, so that was our little Parshat Zachor thing. You see, the two shurim are sort of related to one another, but hopefully, God gave us Baruch Hashem. We have malchut, we have sovereignty. What we do with our sovereignty, how we use it as God's people, and how we're involved with that's a big challenge nowadays. And hopefully, we pray that God guide us to use it properly, the best way we can. What the right thing to do is, I don't know. You follow? God gives us challenges that are super difficult, but you pray not that you don't pray to God that you don't pray to God that your understanding is correct. Yeah? You pray to God that He guides you with the right understanding. So on election day, you don't pray that your party wins. You pray to God that He helps you choose the right party. You understand the difference? There's a big difference between the two. Yeah, sure.